I always believed being pushed out of someone's life would feel dramatic. Like a fight, like slammed doors and raised voices. I thought there would be a moment where I could say, "Wait, what did I do?" And someone would answer. But that's not how it happened. It happened quietly. So quietly, it almost felt polite. My phone buzzed in my hand on a cold December afternoon. No ringtone, no warning, just a soft vibration, like it didn't want to disturb me. I was sitting in my living room, the curtains half open, watching the gray light crawl across the floor. When I looked down at the screen, I saw my grandson's name. I smiled before I even opened it. I don't know why. Habit, I guess. Hope is a stubborn thing. Then I read the message. "You're not needed at Christmas, Grandma. Mom says it's just us this year." I didn't react right away. I just stared at the words. 14 of them short neat, carefully typed. The kind of message you can send without feeling much at all. I read it again and again. I tilted my phone slightly, like the angle might change the meaning. It didn't. There was no follow-up, no heart emoji, no sorry, no "we'll see you soon." Just, "You're not needed, not wanted, not included, not necessary." I felt something inside me shrink, not break, not shatter, just fold in on itself, like a letter you realize was never meant to be sent. I sat there longer than I want to admit, the phone heavy in my palm, while the little artificial Christmas tree in the corner blinked patiently. Red light, green light, red again. It looked so proud of itself, like it had done its job just by being there. The tree was bare. It always stayed that way until the family came over. That was our tradition. We never decorated early. We did it together. Someone always complained about the lights being tangled. Someone always insisted the star was crooked. And somehow, even after all that arguing, the room would feel full. This year, the tree waited. So did I. When I finally lowered myself into my chair, my knees protested the way they always do now. A deep, familiar ache. But that wasn't the pain that made my jaw tighten. That pain lived somewhere higher, somewhere quieter. I didn't answer the message. What could I say? Should I ask why and risk hearing something worse? Should I pretend it didn't hurt and type something cheerful with an exclamation point? Should I apologize for existing too loudly? No, I've lived too long to beg someone to keep me. The house smelled like cinnamon and lemon polish. I had cleaned it the day before, not because it needed it, but because I thought company was coming. I had wiped down the counters, straightened the chairs, even set the dining table. 3 plates. I don't know why I set 3. Muscle memory, maybe or hope. The kind you don't even realize you're carrying until it embarrasses you. I had bought a small turkey too. I remember standing in the grocery store, holding it, thinking it might be too much for one person. I almost put it back. Funny how things change. Turns out it was too much for nobody. I stood up at some point and walked to the sideboard without really deciding to. My hands reached for the photo albums the way they always do, like they know where comfort is stored. The covers were worn soft, edges rounded from years of opening and closing. Christmases stared back at me, my son, younger then, with wrapping paper balanced on his head like a crown, grinning like he'd invented joy. Me in a green sweater with stitched snowflakes, laughing at something I can't remember anymore. And my grandson, small and round and sticky-faced, clutching toy trains with chocolate smeared across his mouth. That same boy who once refused to sleep unless I sang to him. That same boy who had typed, "You're not needed." I closed the album carefully, like it might feel pain if I wasn't gentle. Somehow, I ended up in the kitchen. I don't remember walking there. I stood in front of the stove, staring at burners that hadn't been turned on yet. The turkey sat in the fridge, uncooked, wrapped and waiting, just like me. The house was too quiet, not peaceful, hollow, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring because there's nothing else to listen to. I sat down again and picked up my phone. The message was still there. I typed, "I see," then deleted it. Typed, "Understood," deleted that too. I turned the phone face down, like that would make it stop existing, like that would make the words disappear from my chest. That night, sleep didn't really come. The heater clicked on and off, a sound you only notice when there's no one else breathing in the room. I lay under the heavy quilt I had sewn years ago, back when my husband was still alive and my hands didn't ache the way they do now. Derek would have said something dry, something sharp enough to make me laugh despite myself. Well, he would have said, "Looks like we got fired from Christmas." But Derek had been gone a long time, and there was no one left to laugh with. Morning arrived without ceremony. I made tea and forgot to drink it. I tried to read, but kept staring at the same sentence until the words stopped making sense. I turned on the television, but the cheerful music felt wrong, like someone smiling at a funeral. I kept looking at the tree, still bare, still blinking. Then something in me shifted. I stood up and went to the closet. I pulled out a blue wool dress I hadn't worn in over a year, brushed it off, slipped it on. It fit. A little loose now, but still mine. I found the small pearl earrings my grandson had given me years ago. They weren't real pearls, but I wore them anyway. I wrapped the cookies I had baked days earlier in a clean towel. Sugar and spice, his favorite. I didn't call ahead. I didn't ask permission. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I just put on my coat and stepped outside. I took the bus like I used to. Same route, same stops. Everything felt familiar and strange at the same time. Snow drifted down lightly, the kind that doesn't stick but makes the world feel muted, like it's holding its breath. When I got off, I walked the rest of the way, slowly. My joints complained. I ignored them. Some things matter more than comfort. Their house glowed from the sidewalk. Lights everywhere. Music floating through the walls. Laughter spilling into the cold night air. It looked warm, complete, like something I was no longer part of. I stood there longer than I should have. Then I knocked. The sound echoed louder than I expected, sharp against the polished wood, cutting through their celebration like it didn't belong there. For a moment, nothing happened. I almost hoped no one would answer. That would have been easier. Then the door opened. It was my grandson, older now, taller, broader in the shoulders. Still my grandson. His eyes widened, his mouth opened, then closed. "Grandma," he finally said, his voice cracking at the edges. I held out the tin of cookies. "I just came to drop these off," I said quietly. "I baked them for Christmas." He didn't take them, and before he could say anything else, a familiar voice called from inside the house. A voice I knew too well. A voice that didn't sound surprised, just annoyed. And in that moment, standing there with cold in my bones and cookies in my hands, I understood something that took me far too long to learn. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't confusion. This was a decision. The voice came closer before I could step back. "Who's at the door?" it said again, sharper this time. My grandson shifted his weight, finally reaching out to take the tin from my hands like it was heavier than it looked. His fingers brushed mine, warm and unsure. It's Grandma," he said, not turning around. Then she appeared. Perfect hair, perfect lipstick, a wine glass already in her hand. She stopped the moment she saw me, like someone who'd walked into a room they thought they had locked. "Oh," she said, not surprised, not relieved, just irritated. The kind of "oh you use" when a problem shows up early. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice steady. I was proud of that part. I didn't let it shake. She glanced past me, toward the street, like she was checking whether I'd brought trouble with me. Then she smiled tight polite. The smile you give a stranger who won't take a hint. "I thought Michael explained things," she said. "He didn't," I replied. "Owen sent the message." That landed harder than I expected. Her jaw tightened. She looked at her son. "We talked about this." Owen's eyes dropped to the floor. He was 16 now, old enough to drive, old enough to know what words can do. "I just thought," he started. "Thought what?" she snapped. Too fast for a holiday evening. Then she caught herself and softened her tone, like flipping a switch. "Edith, we just thought it might be easier this year, smaller. You know how chaotic the holidays get." I nodded slowly. "I do." And then I stepped inside. I didn't ask. I didn't wait for an invitation. I just crossed the threshold like I'd done 1,000 times before. The warmth hit me all at once. Expensive perfume, pine, glazed meat. The sound of laughter dropped in volume, the way it does when people notice something uncomfortable. Someone had seen me. Down the hallway, a familiar voice said my name. Mom, heavy footsteps, a pause. My son came into view, tie loosened, cheeks flushed from wine and company. When he saw me, his expression didn't light up. It didn't fall either. It tightened. You weren't supposed to be here, he said. Not cruel, just honest. I noticed. I replied. He glanced at his wife, then at his son, then back at me, like he was trying to arrange the scene into something manageable. We didn't want to upset you. Then you should have told me the truth, I said. That would have hurt less. Behind him, I could see the dining room, a long table, crystal glasses, linen napkins, candles glowing soft and steady. My place wasn't set. Mom, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. This year's been a lot. Megan's parents are here. The kids. Space is tight. We just thought it might be too much for you. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I hosted 30 people in a 2-bedroom house when you were 10, I said. I don't remember anyone worrying about my space then. He flinched. I'm not here to cause a scene, I added. I just wanted to see my family on Christmas. Silence settled in the hallway, thick, uncomfortable. My grandson stepped forward and finally took the tin of cookies properly this time, like it was something fragile. Thank you, he whispered. I love your cookies. That almost broke me. Almost. From around the corner, a small face peeked out. Wide eyes, dark curls. My great-granddaughter. She stared at me like she was trying to remember where she knew me from. Hi, sweetheart, I said gently. She smiled, shy and unsure, then disappeared again. Well, I said, taking a step back toward the door. I should go. I wouldn't want to make anyone uncomfortable. No one stopped me. Not really. My son opened his mouth, then closed it. His wife took a slow sip of her wine. My grandson looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. That might be best, she said. I nodded once. Merry Christmas. The cold outside hit harder this time, sharp and sudden, like it agreed with what had just happened. I didn't cry on the walk back to the bus stop. I didn't cry on the bus either. I just sat there with my hands folded in my lap while the scent of cinnamon followed me like a ghost. When I got home, the tree was still blinking, cheerful, oblivious. I lit a single candle at the table and sat with it for a long time. Then I picked up the phone, not to argue, not to explain, to make a decision. I left a calm message for my lawyer, clear, deliberate. When I hung up, the house felt quiet again, but it didn't feel empty. Something had shifted. And I knew deep down that Christmas had ended something in me that had been hurting for years. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was crying, and not because I was angry. My mind just wouldn't settle. It kept replaying the way my son's eyes slid past me, the way my daughter-in-law's smile never reached her face, the way my grandson's hands shook when he took the cookies. I realized something that hurt more than the message itself. This hadn't started that day. That text hadn't come out of nowhere. It was just the first time someone had been honest enough to put it in writing. The morning after Christmas arrived quietly. No calls, no apologies, no "are you okay?" I woke up early. The sky outside still a dull gray, the kind that makes everything look unfinished. I made myself breakfast like it was any other day. Toast. Eggs. I ate slowly, deliberately, like I was proving something to myself. That I was still here, that I still knew how to take care of my own body, even if no one else was paying attention. After I cleared the dishes, I opened the hall closet and pulled down an old showbox labeled in my handwriting. Inside were papers I hadn't looked at in years, loan records, bank statements, little notes I'd written to myself in the margins, reminders of who needed what and when. $5,000 for the down payment on my son's first house. A check for private school tuition when my grandson was struggling. $8,000 for a kitchen remodel that was supposed to be temporary help. I ran my fingers along the pages and felt something shift again, heavier this time. Not sadness, recognition. I had spent years earning a place at a table that was already mine. For what? A forced lunch once every few months, a rushed birthday call, a Christmas message telling me I wasn't needed. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Soft, hesitant. Not the confident knock of someone who assumes they belong. When I opened it, I saw my other grandson standing there, snow clinging to the shoulders of his coat, guilt written plainly across his face. He held a small gift bag in one hand like it was an offering. I didn't know, he said before I could speak, about the message, about any of it. I believe you, I said. And I did. He stepped inside and looked around, taking in the bare tree, the quiet house. Something tightened in his expression, like he was finally seeing what had been missing. "I'm sorry," he said again. "You shouldn't have found out like that. Sit." I told him. "Have some tea." In the kitchen, we moved around each other easily, like muscle memory hadn't forgotten us yet. He handed me the gift bag. Inside was a scarf, handwear upon, uneven in places, and a small note written in careful handwriting. It thanked me for teaching him how to tell the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. That was when I had to look away. We talked quietly about nothing and everything, about how strange families become when no one wants to say the hard things out loud, about how holidays turn into performances instead of moments. He listened, really listened, and when he left, he hugged me the way people do when they're afraid you might disappear. After the door closed, I stood there for a long time. The house was still quiet, but it didn't feel accusing anymore. It felt settled, like it was waiting for me to decide what came next. That evening, I took the ornaments out of storage. I decorated the tree by myself, slowly. Crooked angel, faded felt gingerbread man, the star that never quite stayed straight. I didn't rush. I didn't cry. I just let the memories sit where they belonged. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was decorating for someone else. I was decorating for me. The days after that passed more quietly than I expected. No phone calls, no sudden apologies, just the slow return of routine. The kind that settles in when you stop waiting for someone else to interrupt your life. I woke up early, made my bed, opened the curtains, and let the winter light come in without asking it to soften itself for me. I noticed things I hadn't in a long time. The way the floor creaked near the hallway, the faint whistle the kettle made just before it boiled, the smell of the soap I'd been using for years without really smelling it. It struck me then how much of my life had been lived in anticipation, waiting for visits, waiting for calls, waiting for holidays to feel like they used to, waiting for someone to remember me without a reminder. I had arranged my days around other people's availability for so long that I hadn't noticed how small my own days had become. One afternoon, I sat at the dining table with a notebook and a pen, not to write letters, not to make lists for anyone else, just to see what happened if I asked myself a simple question. What do I want now? The answer didn't come right away. That surprised me. I stared at the blank page and realized how rarely I'd been asked that, even by myself. I wrote a few false starts, things that sounded responsible, things that sounded polite. Then I crossed them out. Finally, I wrote one sentence and stopped. I don't want to feel invisible anymore. Seeing it on paper felt different, heavier, truer. That was the afternoon I called the bank. My voice didn't shake. I asked questions. I listened. I took notes. When the woman on the line told me certain accounts would notify my son automatically, I said, "That's fine," and I meant it. For the first time, I wasn't bracing myself for his reaction. I wasn't rehearsing explanations in my head. I was just making decisions. After I hung up, I sat very still. There was no rush of triumph, no fear either, just a strange calm, like setting something down after carrying it for too long and realizing your hands are free. That evening, I went through the house room by room, not cleaning, remembering. The spare bedroom still held boxes I'd been meaning to sort through for years. Old clothes, old books, old versions of myself. I opened one box and found a stack of Christmas cards I had never sent. Messages written carefully, then tucked away when I worried they sounded needy or dramatic. I read them now without flinching. They weren't needy. They were honest. I didn't throw them away. I didn't send them either. I just placed them back in the box and closed the lid. Some words don't need an audience anymore. 2 days later, my phone rang. My daughter's name appeared on the screen. We hadn't spoken in months. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice was cautious, measured, like she was testing the ground. She said she'd heard about Christmas. She said she hadn't known about the message. She said she was sorry. I listened without interrupting. When she paused, waiting for reassurance, I didn't give it. I told her the truth instead, that this hadn't been about one holiday, that it had been building quietly for years, that I was tired of being remembered only when it was convenient. There was silence on the line, not anger, not denial, just the sound of someone realizing they might have misjudged the balance of things. She asked if I was changing my will. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, I'm changing how I live. That ended the conversation better than anything else I could have said. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. No replaying conversations. No rehearsing explanations. Just rest. The next morning, I woke with an ache in my hip and a clarity in my chest. I moved slowly, made myself breakfast, and decided to decorate the tree properly this time. One added a few new lights, rearranged the ornaments. Let it be uneven. Let it be mine. When I stepped back, the room didn't look empty. It looked claimed, and somewhere in that quiet, between the glow of the tree and the hum of the house, I understood something that changed everything going forward. I wasn't walking away from my family. I was walking back to myself. The call from the lawyer came the next afternoon. Not urgent, not dramatic. Just a calm voice confirming dates, documents, procedures. He spoke the way people do when they assume emotions have already been handled somewhere else. When I hung up, I sat there with the phone resting in my lap and realized something that startled me. I wasn't scared. I had expected fear, guilt, a sudden urge to undo everything and smooth it over the way I always had. But none of that came. What came instead was a quiet certainty, the kind that doesn't argue with you or ask permission. Later that day, there was another knock at the door. This one was firmer, not familiar. I knew who it was before I opened it. My son stood on the porch, hands in his coat pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, like a man bracing for weather he can't control. No gift, no smile, just a practiced seriousness he usually reserved for business meetings. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside and let him in without answering. He looked around the living room like he was trying to remember where he fit now. The tree was lit. The ornaments hung unevenly. Everything looked the same, and yet it didn't belong to him the way it once had. "I heard you called the bank," he said. "Yes," I replied. "And the lawyer?" "Yes," he exhaled sharply. "Mom, this is extreme." I sat down in my chair. I didn't invite him to sit. He chose the edge of the couch, posture stiff. "Extreme would have been yelling," I said, "or showing up unannounced to cause a scene. I didn't do either." "This is about Christmas, isn't it?" he said. "You're letting one bad moment and do everything." I looked at him then, really looked. The man I had raised, the boy whose scraped knees I had cleaned, the adult who now spoke to me like I was a problem to be managed. "This isn't about one moment," I said quietly. "This is about every time I made myself smaller so you could feel comfortable." He frowned. "That's not fair. It's honest." He rubbed his face, frustration leaking through. "You know Megan didn't mean it like that. Things just got complicated." "They always do," I said. "That's the excuse. Complicated enough that I disappear." Silence stretched between us. He finally stood, pacing a little, then stopped. "So what now?" he asked. "You cut us off. You punish us." I shook my head. "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm stopping." He turned toward me. "Stopping what?" "Stopping the pretending," I said. "Stopping the money being mistaken for love. Stopping the assumption that I'll always be here, waiting, no matter how I'm treated." His voice softened, almost pleading. "You know we still love you." I nodded. "Love isn't a statement. It's a behavior." That landed harder than anything else I'd said. He sank back onto the couch, suddenly looking older, smaller. "I didn't realize," he said. "I did," I replied. "That's the difference. We didn't hug when he left. We didn't argue either." He paused at the door like he wanted to say something else, then thought better of it. After he was gone, the house didn't feel shaken. It felt steadier. That evening, my grandson, the one who had come earlier with the scarf, called me. Not to ask questions, not to fix anything, just to talk. He told me about work, about his girlfriend, about a recipe he'd messed up. Ordinary things, precious things. When we hung up, I smiled for real. Later, as I washed dishes, I caught my reflection in the window. Older. Yes. Tired. A little. But not broken, not fading. For the first time in years, my life felt like it was facing forward instead of waiting behind a door that might never open. And I knew then that whatever came next, anger, guilt, reconciliation, or distance, I would meet it standing up. The next few days were quieter than I expected, but the quiet had changed its shape. It wasn't the hollow kind that presses on your ears. It was the kind that gives you room to think. I moved through the house differently, slower, but more deliberately, like I wasn't rushing to be ready for someone else's schedule anymore. On the third morning after my son's visit, I woke up before the alarm and lay there listening to the house breathe. The pipes clicked. The wind brushed against the windows. I realized I wasn't dreading the day ahead. That alone felt new. I made myself breakfast and ate it at the table instead of standing at the counter like I used to. I set one place, just one. No extra plates just in case. When I finished, I didn't clear it right away. I sat there a moment longer, hands folded, noticing how strange it felt not to be waiting for anyone to arrive. Late morning, the phone rang again. This time it was my daughter-in-law. I almost didn't answer. Not out of fear, out of choice. I let it ring until it nearly stopped, then picked up. Her voice was controlled, careful, like she'd practiced what she was going to say. She talked about misunderstandings, about stress, about how emotional the holidays can be. She said no one meant to hurt me. She said families say things they don't always mean. I listened without interrupting. When she finally paused, expecting forgiveness to slide naturally into the silence, I spoke. I believe you didn't plan to hurt me, I said, but you didn't plan not to either. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. She said I was being dramatic. I told her calmly that drama requires performance, and I was done performing. She asked if this meant I wouldn't help them anymore. Not financially, she said, just in general. That told me everything I needed to know. I'll help when I'm treated like family, I replied, not like a convenience. The line went quiet. Then she said she needed time to think. So do I answered, and I hung up. My hands didn't shake afterward. That surprised me. For years, even the hint of conflict had sent me spiraling into apologies and explanations. Now there was just stillness. That afternoon, I went out for a walk. Not far, just around the neighborhood. I noticed houses I'd passed 1,000 times without seeing. A woman watering dead winter plants, like she believed in spring anyway. A man shoveling snow for a neighbor who wasn't home. Small acts, quiet kindness, life happening without announcements. When I came back, there was a note taped to my door. Just 3 words, written in familiar handwriting. I'm coming by. It was from my grandson. He arrived an hour later, carrying nothing but himself. No gift, no agenda. He kicked off his shoes at the door without asking and stood there awkwardly, like he wasn't sure if the rules had changed. I wanted to check on you, he said. Then you're in the right place, I replied. We sat at the kitchen table. He talked about the tension at home, about arguments he didn't want to be part of, about how strange it felt to realize the adults he'd trusted weren't always right. I didn't understand how much you gave, he said quietly. Not just money. Time. Space. Forgiveness. I nodded. Most people don't notice what's always there. He looked at me, really looked, like he was memorizing my face. I don't want to be like that, he said. I don't want to only show up when it benefits me. That's a choice you'll make more than once, I told him. Not just today. He stayed for tea, helped me wash the cups afterward. Simple things, normal things, the kind of presence that doesn't need to announce itself. When he left, he hugged me tightly, not rushed, not guilty, just honest. That night, I opened the folder with my documents again, not to change anything, just to look, to remind myself that the decisions I'd made weren't reactions. They were boundaries, and boundaries, I was learning, don't have to be loud to be strong. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I felt something settle into place. A quiet resolve, the kind that doesn't demand recognition. Whatever came next, I wasn't going to chase it. I was finally letting life come to me. The shift didn't announce itself right away. It crept in through small things. A missed automatic transfer, a declined payment, a question asked too late in a hushed voice. I didn't hear about it at first, but I felt it. The quiet after I changed my accounts wasn't empty anymore. It was charged. The first sign came in the form of a voicemail I didn't listen to right away. Then another, then two more. I let them sit, not because I was trying to punish anyone, but because I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't rush in to smooth things over. For years, urgency had trained me. If someone sounded worried, I responded. If someone hinted at discomfort, I fixed it. I had been conditioned to confuse speed with love. When I finally listened, the tone was different than before. Less concern, more calculation. My son talked about timing, about bills, about how everything was a little tight right now. He said he hoped I was doing okay. He said they'd noticed a few changes and wanted to make sure nothing had gone wrong. Nothing had gone wrong. Everything had finally gone right. The next call came from my daughter-in-law. Her voice was softer than usual, almost sweet. She asked how I was feeling. She mentioned stress. She said she'd been worried about me living alone, about whether I might need help managing things. She said it casually, like she was offering kindness, but I heard the edge underneath it. Concern shaped like control. I'm managing just fine, I said. There was a pause. Then she asked if I'd consider putting things back the way they were, just temporarily, until everyone had a chance to adjust. That word stuck with me. Adjust. As if my life were a setting that had been changed without permission. No, I said, not loudly, not angrily, just clearly. The silence on the line felt different this time. Not confused, not offended. Alarmed. After that, the messages changed. Less pretense, more urgency. My son showed up again. This time without knocking, like habit had pushed him forward before thought caught up. I didn't rush to the door. I finished my tea first. When I opened it, he looked tired, not apologetic. tired in the way people get when a plan stops working. We need to talk, he said. We already have, I replied. He stepped inside anyway, pacing like the room might give him answers. He talked about responsibilities, about family expectations, about how drastic changes can cause instability. He never once asked how I felt. He talked around me, over me, through me. Finally, I stopped him. You're not here because you miss me, I said. You're here because something you counted on is gone. He opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it again. That doesn't make you a bad person, I continued, but it does mean this conversation isn't about love. It's about access. He looked at me like I'd said something dangerous. You're acting like we used you, he said. I'm acting like I finally noticed, I replied. His voice rose then, not shouting, but sharp. He talked about everything I'd done for the family, as if it were evidence that I should keep doing it. He talked about fairness, about how things had always been, about how hard life was. I let him talk until he ran out of breath. Fairness isn't everyone taking from one person until she disappears, I said quietly. And what we've always done doesn't matter if it was hurting me. That was the moment his frustration turned into something else. Fear. He realized then that I wasn't negotiating, that there was no version of this conversation where I folded, that the safety net he'd grown used to had been removed, not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. He left without another word. After that, the call slowed. The tone shifted again. Less pressure, more distance. I could feel the family recalibrating, deciding where to place their energy now that mine was no longer automatically available. And in that space they left behind, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter, not because I'd won anything, not because I enjoyed their discomfort, but because I wasn't carrying their panic anymore. I wasn't responsible for keeping everything afloat. I wasn't the quiet solution in the background. That night, I sat in my living room with the lights low and realized something that surprised me. I wasn't lonely. I was alone, yes, but there was a difference. Loneliness aches. This felt like breathing room for the first time in a very long while. The future didn't look like a series of obligations waiting to be fulfilled. It looked open, unscripted. Mine, and somewhere in that calm, I understood something that made me smile to myself in the dark. They were adjusting, but so was I. And this time, I wasn't the one bending. The quiet that followed felt different from all the other silences I'd known. It wasn't sharp or punishing. It didn't echo. It settled in gently, like snow after a storm, softening the edges of everything it touched. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes, stopped bracing myself for the next demand disguised as concern. Days passed, then weeks, and I realized something important had happened without my permission. I had made space. With that space came mornings that belonged to me. I woke when my body told me to, not when obligation tugged me out of bed. I cooked food I actually wanted to eat, not what I thought someone else might like if they happened to stop by. I left dishes in the sink until I felt like washing them. Small rebellions, quiet freedoms. One afternoon, I found myself walking past the community center a few blocks from my house. I'd passed it 100 times before, without noticing it, like it didn't apply to me. That day, the doors were open, and laughter spilled out onto the sidewalk. Real laughter, unpolished. I stood there longer than I meant to, listening. A woman about my age noticed me hovering and waved me in like we already knew each other. Inside, a handful of people were setting up tables. Someone was arguing about where the coffee should go. Someone else was humming off-key. No one asked who I was or why I'd come. They just handed me a stack of napkins and said, "You look like you know where these should go." I did. I stayed longer than I planned. Talked to people whose stories didn't require me to fix anything. A widower who baked too much bread. A single mother who laughed every time she was tired. A retired teacher who still corrected grammar out of habit. No one knew my history. No one needed it. When I got home that evening, I felt the kind of exhaustion that comes from use, not neglect. My feet ached. My back complained, but my chest felt full. I went back the next week, then the week after that. Eventually, they stopped calling me new and started calling me by my name. I brought soup one night. Someone asked for the recipe. Someone else asked if I'd be back next Tuesday. The question caught me off guard. "Yes," I said, "I think I will." Around that time, my grandson, the one who still came by just to sit, noticed the change. He said I looked different, lighter. I told him I'd found a place where no one expected me to perform gratitude in exchange for being included. He smiled and said, "That sounds like family." It surprised me how easily that word fit. Not everyone was happy about my new rhythm. My daughter called once, tentative again, asking why I'd been so busy lately. I told her the truth, that I'd found people who showed up without needing reminders, people who didn't keep score. She went quiet. I didn't rush to fill the silence. Life rearranged itself quietly. I donated clothes I'd been saving for special occasions. I repainted the spare room a color I liked, not one that matched expectations. I started writing things down in a notebook, memories, thoughts, small truths I'd swallowed for years. I wasn't writing for an audience. I was writing to remember myself. One evening, as I sat with a cup of tea, I realized something else had changed. I no longer wondered if they missed me. That question had lost its power. What mattered now was that I didn't miss the version of myself who waited by the phone, who apologized for taking up space, who confused usefulness with worth. That woman felt far away, like someone I'd known once, but no longer lived as. When I turned out the lights that night, I felt steady, not triumphant, not bitter, just rooted. And I knew the next time they reached out because it wouldn't be on their terms anymore. It would be on mine. They reached out sooner than I expected, not with anger, not with accusations, with politeness, the kind that feels rehearsed. My son called on a Sunday afternoon, his voice careful, measured, like he was walking across ice he didn't trust. He asked how I'd been. He mentioned the weather. He said it had been a while and thought maybe we could sit down and talk, just to clear the air. I told him he could come by. When he arrived, he didn't bring wine or apologies. He brought tension. He sat on the couch like a guest this time, not like someone who assumed ownership of the space. That alone told me everything had shifted. I just want us to understand each other, he said. I understand you, I replied. I always have. That startled him. He wasn't prepared for calm. He'd expected resistance, maybe emotion he could manage. Instead, he got stillness. He talked for a while about how hard things had been, about pressure, about responsibility, about how none of it had been personal. He said people make mistakes when they're overwhelmed. He said family should forgive. I let him finish. Then I spoke. I forgave you a long time ago, I said. Forgiveness wasn't the problem. Disappearing was. He frowned. I never meant to make you feel that way. I know, I said. Intent doesn't erase impact. He shifted. Uncomfortable. He said he wanted things to go back to normal. That word again, normal. I don't want the old normal, I told him. The old normal cost me my voice. He asked what I wanted now. That question used to terrify me. Now it didn't. I want honesty, I said. I want presence. And I want a relationship that doesn't depend on what I provide. He nodded slowly, but I could see the calculation behind his eyes. He asked if there was a path forward, if things could be repaired. They already are, I said, just not in the way you're imagining. He left without anger, without resolution, without relief. But something had landed. A few days later, my daughter reached out. Her message was longer than usual, less defensive, more uncertain. She said she'd been thinking. She said she missed me. She said she didn't know how to fix things. I didn't rush to respond. When I did, I kept it simple. I'm open to rebuilding, I wrote. But I won't go back to being unseen. She replied with a single word, okay. I didn't know what that meant yet. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to chase the meaning down. That weekend, my grandson came over again. We cooked together, burned the first batch of bread, laughed about it. He told me he'd started saying no to things that drained him. Said watching me had changed how he thought about strength. That mattered more than any apology. Later that night, alone again, I thought about how strange it was that clarity had come not from confrontation, but from stillness, from refusing to react the way I always had, from letting people feel the absence of what they'd taken for granted. I hadn't demanded respect. I had modeled it, and that changed everything. I went to bed knowing the final chapter of this story wasn't about reconciliation or distance. It was about choice, and this time, I was the one holding it. The morning I realized the story was ending didn't feel dramatic. There was no announcement, no swell of emotion. It felt ordinary, which somehow made it more honest. I woke early, the way I always do now, and sat by the window with my tea. Outside, the street was waking up in small pieces. A car starting, a dog pulling its owner along the sidewalk, someone laughing 2 houses down. Life moving forward without asking me to approve it. My phone sat on the table beside me. It didn't buzz, and for the first time, that didn't feel like rejection. It felt like peace. Later that day, I went to the community center again. I brought soup, the kind that doesn't try to impress anyone, just warm, familiar, the kind people finish without thinking. A woman I'd met only weeks before saved me a seat without asking. Someone else asked how my hip was doing. They noticed. That still surprised me. On my way home, I stopped at the market and bought flowers for myself. Not because it was a special day, because it wasn't. Because I didn't need an excuse anymore. That evening, my daughter called. Not long, not emotional, just a real conversation. She asked how I was. I told her the truth. She said she was trying to learn how to listen without defending herself. I told her that was a good place to start. We didn't fix anything. We didn't promise anything. And somehow, that felt healthier than all the forced closeness we'd tried before. After we hung up, I didn't analyze the call. I didn't replay it. I didn't measure what it meant. I let it be what it was, a step, or maybe just a pause. Either way, it wasn't mine to control. That night, I sat in the living room with the lights low, the tree still glowing softly even though the holidays were long past. I thought about the woman I had been when that message arrived, the way she'd stared at her phone, waiting for the words to change, waiting for permission to matter. I felt tenderness for her now, not shame, not anger. She had done the best she could with what she knew, but she had stayed too long in places that made her feel small. I hadn't lost my family. I had lost the illusion that love meant endurance without dignity. And in letting that illusion go, I'd found something quieter, sturdier, and far more lasting. Self-respect. The kind that doesn't raise its voice. The kind that doesn't chase. The kind that stays. When I went to bed that night, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel wounded either. I felt complete, not because everything had been resolved, but because I finally understood where I stood. I was no longer waiting to be invited. I belonged to myself first, and if anyone wanted to meet me there, they would have to come with honesty, not entitlement. The house settled around me as I turned off the light. Not empty, not lonely, just full enough, and that was more than enough. The weeks that followed didn't rush me toward anything. They unfolded the way real life doesn't, evenly, quietly, without asking whether I was ready. And somehow, that was exactly what I needed. Spring crept in without ceremony. The light changed first, then the air, then the small green things pushing up through the soil like they'd made a promise to themselves and kept it. I started spending more time in the yard, my hands in the dirt, my knees complaining, my heart strangely steady. I planted bulbs without worrying who would see them bloom. I planted them because I would. One afternoon, my grandson came by with a wooden frame he'd been working on, a raised garden bed, he said, so I wouldn't have to bend as much. He didn't make a big deal out of it, just set it down, asked where I wanted it, and got to work. We didn't talk much while he hammered. We didn't need to. Presence filled the space where explanations used to live. At one point, he wiped his hands on his jeans and said, almost casually, I think you changed how I see things. I asked him what he meant. He shrugged and said, I don't think love is supposed to feel like pressure anymore. That stayed with me long after he left. Not everything repaired itself. My son called occasionally. Sometimes the conversations were stiff. Sometimes they were better. My daughter sent a card once. No long message, just her handwriting, careful and unsure. I didn't read into it. I didn't dismiss it either. I let it exist where it was. That was the difference now. I no longer needed people to be perfect in order for me to be okay. One evening, as the sun went down and the house settled into its familiar sounds, I found an old notebook in a drawer. Inside were lists I'd made years ago, things I'd planned to do someday. Most of them had nothing to do with anyone else. Learn to paint properly. Take a class just for fun. Write down the stories I used to tell the kids so I wouldn't forget them. I smiled at how long I'd waited for permission to live my own life. I picked up a pen and added a new page. Not a list this time, a sentence. I'm allowed to take up space. I didn't decorate it. I didn't explain it. I just let it be true. That night, I dreamed of nothing in particular. No arguments. No doors closing. Just movement. Walking. Breathing. Waking up without dread. When morning came, I felt the quiet certainty again. The one that didn't need reinforcement. The one that didn't ask anyone else to agree. I had been many things in my life. A wife, a mother, a grandmother, a provider, a background, presence, a safety net. But now, finally, I was something else too, whole. And if this story stayed with you, if you recognized yourself in the waiting, the shrinking, the slow realization, I hope you remember this part most of all. You don't need a dramatic ending to reclaim your life. You don't need permission. You don't need to be needed. You just need to decide that you matter and then live like it's true. I didn't know it at the time, but the last shift happened on a very ordinary afternoon. I was standing in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hands wet from washing vegetables, when the phone rang. Not the sharp, urgent ring that used to make my stomach tighten. Just a normal ring. I dried my hands slowly before answering. That alone told me how far I'd come. It was my son, not rushed, not defensive, just quieter. He asked how I was. I told him the truth, that I'd been gardening, that my knees hurt, that I'd been sleeping better than I had in years. There was a pause. Then he said something he'd never said before. I didn't realize how much you cared for us. I didn't rush to respond. I didn't soften it for him. I just let the words sit where they belonged. I know, I said. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He didn't try to bargain his way back to comfort. He just listened. When we hung up, there was no promise of change, no dramatic reconciliation. But there was something real in the space we left behind, and that was enough. That evening, my grandson came by with his partner. They brought bread they'd baked themselves. It was a little too dense, a little too dark on the bottom. We laughed about it. We ate it anyway. We sat at the table longer than planned, talking about nothing important and everything that mattered. I watched them across from me and felt something settle deep in my chest. This is what stays, not the money, not the obligation, not the performance of family, presence. Later, after they left, I walked through the house and turned off the lights one by one. Each room felt familiar again, not like a place I maintained for visitors, but like a home that reflected me. In the spare room, the notebook lay open on the desk. Pages filled now, stories, thoughts. Pieces of myself I'd put away for years. I added one last line at the bottom of the page. I didn't disappear. I returned when I went to bed. I thought about the message that had started all of this. Those 14 words that had cut so cleanly they felt surgical. For a long time, I'd believed they meant I wasn't needed. Now I understood something different. I had never needed to be needed. I needed to be respected, seen, chosen without conditions. And when that didn't happen, I learned how to choose myself. If you re-listened this far, if any part of this felt familiar, then maybe this story wasn't just about me. Maybe it was about the quiet ways people disappear when they spent too long being convenient. Maybe it was about how love can turn into expectation if no one stops it in time. Or maybe it was simply a reminder that you are allowed to stop waiting, allowed to take your hands back, allowed to build a life that doesn't require permission. I still love my family. That never changed. What changed was this. I stopped abandoning myself to keep the peace. And in doing that, I found something steadier than approval, stronger than guilt, and quieter than revenge. I found my place, right here,